everyone, and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we are a magazine of hope. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today Magazine, and as usual, I'm joined by another guest that I'm really excited about. I love actually doing interviews with interesting, cool, smart people, and we definitely have one of those here today. Please meet Olivia Remes, and for the introduction, to tell you a little bit about who she is and why I'm excited. Olivia is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, where she focuses on anxiety and depression. She is currently conducting research on anxiety and depression in her postdoctorate, but her research has been featured pretty much everywhere. It's been featured on the BBC, Forbes magazine, USA Today, and she's appeared on several different radio shows, podcasts, all kinds of things, TED Talks. She's really out there and doing some really cool things. So I stumbled upon her, loved her content, reached out, and then we finally could work it out. So Olivia, thanks so much for taking the time to jump on today.
Of course. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation also.
Absolutely. So as somebody that has struggled with this, I guess one of the reasons why this is, kind of near and dear to my heart is obviously Recovery Today, we've got people that are in all forms, I guess I would say, or all areas of addiction recovery. It might even go back to somebody that's thinking like, maybe it's 1 year no beer or sober curious or something like that. Maybe I should try to stop. Maybe I have a problem. To people that are new in recovery, they're 30 days, 60, 90 days, all the way through to people that have been living long-term, happy and successful, sober lives. But there's also all kinds of other, ghosts and goblins and mental chatter that happens in our minds, and probably overlaps with a lot of other things. I know I'm sure you deal with ADHD, ADD. All bipolar, all kinds of things like that. And for me personally, one of the big things that I've had a challenge with, I realize now since I was a kid, was anxiety, and then kind of discovering, having the joy of discovering depression probably early in my 20s. So I love this topic. What led you into this field? I mean, how did you get started?
So many people have anxiety, and I think it's a very important issue to deal with. I started my PhD back in 2013, and back then it wasn't as talked about as now. So back then the focus was all on depression, especially in research. There was so much focus on depression, and anxiety seemed to come secondary to that. And I didn't think it was fair. It wasn't fair to the people suffering from it, because they weren't given the importance that they deserved. I mean, so many times people would think that anxiety is just nerves, that it's just a weakness that you have to deal with. But it's so much more than that. And when I began looking at some of the research that was on anxiety, studies were showing that it leads to depression, it can lead to suicide, to substance abuse, problems with alcohol abuse. And that's really important, and a lot of people didn't know that, even researchers, or other academics, and I felt that I wanted to show how important anxiety was. So first of all, to show how many people are affected, who is most affected, and the negative consequences that are linked to anxiety. So that's, it was just my passion for this topic and wanting to shed more light on it and to bring awareness to the world when it comes to anxiety.
And so, of course, the dot to that part of the story is you had an overwhelming response. And one of the things I love in some of the interviews that I've watched of you is you kind of articulating the costs of this, societal costs and then personal costs and things like that. How big is this in terms of, something that how it affects? I mean, what are the costs of anxiety?
It's estimated that in the U.S., the costs it was something like $42 billion. And so this includes hospitalization costs related to prescription drug use. When you go to the clinic, when you see a doctor, there are costs involved with that. So the costs are tremendous. and anxiety is growing. So there are more and more people that are affected by it. So I expect that the costs will increase if we don't do something about it.
For sure.
So
I think that I really applaud what you're doing, because I think that it is, I mean, you just telling me, like, well, when I started this out, there really wasn't much out there. So, I mean, I think that it's very much needed, and it doesn't surprise me that as soon as you start putting out great information, that people would just completely, unfortunately, they would really, really consume it. What is are we wired differently? What is the deal with, I mean, why does this happen?
There are so many reasons. I mean, if we're looking at just the factors that cause anxiety, there are multiple things. So, you know, one of the things is whether or not you had a chronic illness in the past, like cancer or diabetes, so a serious illness that you dealt with. If you suffered from trauma, like sexual or physical abuse, or if you had to deal with serious life problems, like if you've been through a divorce, or even if your parents divorced, this can put you at risk. But also how we're raised is important. So, you know, as children, we look to our parents as role models. And if we see them reacting with anxiety in certain situations, then we're more likely to behave in the same ways. So, for example, if let's say your mother is extremely afraid of spiders, she has arachnophobia, then you are more likely to adopt the same fear and to react with the same anxiety later on. So role models,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so many things are contagious, even anxiety. If you are surrounded by people with anxiety or depression, you know, there was this study that showed that if you're living with a roommate who's depressed, you're more likely to become depressed.
Wow.
Yeah, and same with happiness. So it's kind of like, make sure that, you know, be careful who you surround yourself with, because that can have an impact on you and the type of person that you become.
I wonder if from, I mean, I'm kind of thinking of the woo-woo part of my brain and quantum physics and all of the energy talk that we have now. Probably shouldn't say it's woo-woo, because, you know, most people say, I got science, but it's very new and different kind of a frontier. I'm wondering if it's like we're actually transmitting off, or is it just, you know, micro expressions and things like that, or how you're dealing with things, or this person is a positive kind of person, this person is a negative kind of person. Like, I love the idea that it's, well, I don't love that it's contagious, but with addiction and sobriety, particularly the opiate epidemic, we call it not only a disease. Of course, people in, you know, recovery call addiction, and I believe it's a disease, but I believe that it's a socially contagious epidemic is what it is. And so exact same kind of thing, that you get around people that are having problems like that, and so you catch it.
Yeah.
Is that something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it could be down to you seeing someone behave in a certain way on repeatedly, and the more you see that, it's kind of like a role model. You might not think of the person as a role model for you, but their behavior, their attitude starts to rub off on us, whether we want to or not. That's why as children, that's why we take on so many of the traits of our parents. It's not that we want to adopt them, you know? When you hear people that she's turned into her mother, or he's turned into his father, it's not that you actively want to become like that. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. It's that when we're constantly surrounded by certain people and they behave in certain ways and have certain attitudes, then we're more likely to be like that as well. Which is why, you know, when you look at different cultures, people of one culture are more likely to be similar than. So, for example, if you're comparing you're looking at people from China versus people from the United States. Somebody from China, they're raised in that environment, they're surrounded by people of that culture, so of course they're more likely to be similar to other people of that same culture, and they're very different from somebody in the United States, living in the United States. And that's because our environment, our culture, affects us. So I guess that goes back to the nature versus nurture debate. And it's not just...
where do you sit in that?
It's both. So genes have a small role to play, but who we surround ourselves with, how we're brought up, how we choose to mold ourselves, that has a huge influence on us. And that kind of led me to looking at coping strategies when it comes to anxiety, because I think, and it's not just that I think that, but research shows that we can develop in certain ways if we make the effort to do so. So, for example, if we practice certain coping strategies repeatedly, then we can change how we are. And the more that you practice something, the more your brain gets rewired. So the neural networks kind of rewire, and we can become a new person. We can essentially change our personality. We can change anything about ourselves if we set our minds to it. So wow. Environment shapes us. We can shape ourselves. It's not that we're set in stone because of the genes that we have, but we can, we can become into the person that we want to become through the things that we do. And
so
that's how environment.
So to kind of confirm what I've been thinking for a long time about nature or nurture, are you born this way or whatever it is. My background was in computer engineering. That's what I had got my degree in. And way back a long time ago, they talked about disks that were read-writable. So I would say, like, there's firmware that you get, and the program is already in it. Like, your brain is already set that way because that's how your mom and dad's brain was. But you can also change the whole thing. So if you mentioned like your mom being afraid of spiders or something like that, then maybe you would be. That doesn't mean that you always have to be, or that your kids are going to be afraid of spiders.
Yeah.
You can overcome it.
Yeah, there's actually one quote which I really like, and it goes like this. So, and it's really funny because whenever I have to remember quotes, like right then and there, they never come to mind. It's always afterwards. This happened to me during a presentation in front of 1,000 people. It was a quote during the question and answer session, and it really captured the essence of what I wanted to say, and it just did not come to my mind then, only afterwards. So I know what the essence of this quote is, but I want to remember every word because it is amazing. So essentially, it says that, So the faults of the parents, the mistakes of the parents become the destinies of the children unless the children wake up and do something about it.
Cool. That's spot on. That's right on point.
And I really liked that. Yeah, because in therapy right now, so many times does the therapist, obviously depending on the therapist, but so many times we're told that it's our parents' fault for the way that we are. But the thing is, this kind of takes the control away from ourselves. So, and there's nothing we can do about it anymore. If it's our parents' fault that we turn out like this, then this takes away our control. We can't mold our lives anymore because we're already doomed, to failure. So I think this quote is really empowering, and that, the mistakes of the parents become the destinies of the children unless the children wake up and do something about it.
I love that.
And this puts control back into our own hands.
There's a really great book that I read. I wouldn't expect it's necessarily in your wheelhouse, although it could surprise me. It was a New York Times bestseller about a year to 2 years ago. It's written by 2 Navy SEALs. So it's called Extreme Ownership. And the main premise of extreme ownership is everything is your fault. So it purposely probably write it that way to be incendiary in the beginning. That, well, what do you mean it's my fault? But because it's coming from Navy SEALs. But the whole idea of it is exactly that, is that, well, your house got blown over in a hurricane or by a tornado, but you chose to live there. Your spouse or your whatever, but you chose. So the whole idea is not to make you feel bad, but it's actually to give you a sense of control that there is something that you could have done differently in the past, that would give you a different outcome than you're experiencing right now, and then therefore there's something that you can do now that will give you a different outcome than you feel like maybe you're destined to have. So, and I've heard that depression, one of the main things about depression is that you feel like you're out of control.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
is this and actually now I really did want to bring depression in because I'm wondering, is it the same thing? Is it like having a cold and you have a sore throat sometime, other times you're achy, or are they separate, do you think?
They're different. Anxiety and depression are different things. Anxiety is when you have this restlessness, you have fear, you might feel like you're constantly alert and hyper and you don't always know why. Whereas depression is low mood. You lose pleasure in things that once you used to greatly enjoy. And it can be very debilitating. One of my friends had depression, and he told me that he would just find it hard to get out of the bed in the morning. And that happened to him. It wasn't just one day. It was days in a row. And, you know, he came from a very well-off family. And you would think that, well, people who have everything, because he had everything. I don't want to go.
What do you got to be sad about? What do you got to be sad about? You have nothing to be sad about.
Yeah, he went to Harvard. His parents were very affluent. He had everything he wanted in life. But he told me that, so not only was he finding it very hard to get out of bed in the morning, but sometimes he would just be in the middle of the street or, somewhere and would just burst into tears for no reason. And so, that's really hard to deal with. Anxiety is, it's a different thing altogether. Anxiety, and there are different forms of anxiety. There's generalized anxiety disorder, which is this excessive, uncontrollable worry. You tend to worry about everything that's going on in your life, and you find it really hard to put the worries out of your mind. You might feel irritable. These worries can keep you up at night. They make it hard to concentrate on your tasks. And you find it really hard to switch the focus of your attention from one topic to another. So that's generalized anxiety disorder, and that's basically what my entire PhD was dedicated to. But there are other ones as well. There's panic disorder, and a lot of people have, what is called the panic attack, which is the main feature of panic disorder. And the panic attack is this intense burst, so this sudden burst of intense anxiety, which peaks within minutes. And you might feel like you're about to have a heart attack or lose control or go mad. And it can arise totally out of the blue.
So is that when I first had experienced depression many, many years ago, I was in my early 20s, and I didn't know I didn't know why I felt bad. It was really strange. I was on a Christmas vacation in college, and I used to work during vacations for a little bit of money, and I was getting ready for work one morning, and I just felt this profound sadness, and so I was thinking, why is this happening? Is it something that does something happen stress-wise that we have chemicals in our brain that have kind of that are depleted or gone down? What I discovered later was it was diagnosed as I got a book on agoraphobia, and then they talked about the what-if cycle in your brain. I would think okay, I'm 18 or 19 or 20 or however what, and I thought most people go crazy, they become schizophrenics or something from teen into adult. This is where it's really critical I make it over this juncture. And so I used to think what if I'm going crazy? What if I'm in a social setting and I flip out? What if, which releases adrenaline, which makes you think what if more and more. Is that kind of can you talk a little bit about like that?
Yeah, what if, that's a really common thing. A lot of people with anxiety and depression, they have that cycle going through their minds. And actually, when you start getting these worries, so what if that negative thing, so that's catastrophizing. You know, what if that negative thing happens? What if that other negative thing will happen? And actually, in regards to this, I like to call it borrowing pain from the future.
Oh, wow.
I really like
that.
Yeah, because you're thinking about how you might be suffering in the future, and like you're suffering right now basically for things that could happen. You know, they haven't.
And probably won't.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And that's the thing. And actually, research shows that when people are asked to track their worries and to write down if they happened or not, that most of the time what you worry about will not come true. It's not going to happen. So I would encourage people out there to try this exercise, whatever they're worried about now, to write it down and then to see, does it actually take place? And then to write that down. And then when you look back over it, you see that, you know, it kind of motivates you to change your thought patterns, because if you see that most of the things that you're worried about don't come true, then perhaps it's time to drop all of those worrying thoughts. But there are many reasons as to why we're so anxious and depressed these days. It could be because of hormonal reasons. It could be because something has happened to you. But one thing which is really important to mention is that we have become lonelier than ever.
Wow.
And this affects our mental health. The number of people that we can confide in today has dropped compared to 30 years ago. And some people are calling it an epidemic of loneliness. So
Why?
If you
supposedly we're so much more connected now. I can post something on Facebook, and all of my family and then my Facebook friends can see it, or people I've worked with or whatever, and comment. I mean, we can share. It seems like it would be the opposite.
Exactly. That's what somebody else was telling me in an interview. He said what you just said, that, you know, it seems like we're more connected than ever, but actually we're lonelier than ever. We're more depressed and anxious than ever, and people are turning to therapy and antidepressants to cope. I mean, so many people are going to therapy these days. You know, so many people are taking medication for their mental health. Self-help has taken off. I mean, therapists go to therapists.
Right.
You know, so we're actually not, I would say that our mental health is at its poorest now. And bringing that back to loneliness, it is because we have fewer friends than we did before. So decades ago, so people were a lot more focused on the collective. And with this rise in individualism, this rise on the self and inner feelings, the question has moved to the self. What is best for me? What can I do for myself that will advance me in society? Whereas the question, say, 50 years ago was, what can I do for my neighbors? What can I do for my community? What can I do for other people? And when you're focused on the self so much as we are today because of this individualism, then you're less likely to be attuned to the needs and wants of those around you. So then when we experience significant life stress, something happens to us, it's very difficult. We can't rely on others as we once could. We can't fall back on other people, you know, to buffer whatever we're going through and to protect our mental health. Because research shows that being embedded in strong social networks, that is really important for our mental health. If you're going through something difficult in life, if you have friends that you can rely on, then that can prevent anxiety and depression from forming. So it's kind of like that song, you know, I can get by with a little help from my friends. That is so true.
Wow.
Yeah, so, you know, social networks, I mean, so basically our social networks have deteriorated because we're not relying as much on others. We're kind of more focused on ourselves, and the goals of the generations have changed. So right now, if you're asking high school students what is the most important goal for their generation, a lot of them will say that, well, it's to become rich and famous. you know?
Right.
And that it's like focused on the self, all about me, what can I do for myself? So, so many things have changed, and all of this makes us have poor mental health, and according to research, it also makes us more narcissistic. So we're actually more narcissistic than ever.
You know, I was just going to ask, like, are we talking about narcissism? Because if everybody's self-focused, you know, and it's funny, maybe we all are, I think, because whenever I think about, I really can relate to loneliness. It's really funny, and probably everybody can, or everybody that would be interested in this interview, but I think to myself, like, when I have a problem, and or I'm just not feeling good, and I want to call somebody or something like that, I think to myself, like, they have their own problems. You know, like, they don't need well, how I feel when somebody calls me that's got a problem. I want to help. I honestly want to try to help them solve it. And maybe it's actually a good distraction for me to get my mind off of what I'm dealing with. But when I'm looking to reach out, I'm thinking, like, but they have their own stuff that they're dealing with. They don't need to try to problem solve for me. What kind of message would you have for somebody that's like me, I guess? What would you say to that?
I would say to never assume anything. If you think that you can ask the person if you can help them with anything, you know, because it never hurts to ask, and if they still prefer to deal with it on their own, then at least you know that you've done something. Or even not necessarily, maybe they don't want emotional support, but maybe just going by and bringing something or seeing how you can, if there's something that you can do for them, or, you know, just showing up and doing little things perhaps, or bringing some kind of, I don't know, something to eat even. It can put them in a better mood, even if it's just for a few moments. You know, it lets them know that they're not alone in this world and that somebody else is there for them. So I think that's...
Is this a kind of a disease or an ailment of our Western society? I mean, in third world countries, is this the same? Is it prevalent like this, or is it everywhere? I'm kind of thinking like, oh yeah, this is an ailment that we have because, you know, we're not worried about what we're going to eat or somebody's going to kill us or something like that necessarily. If we were thinking about, you know, how we were going to survive the night, we had to chop wood or something like that, we probably wouldn't be thinking, is this some kind of how does it compare in other countries where they're, you know, not first world countries?
Yeah, I mean, in other countries, the situation is different. So in low and middle income countries, people tend to be a lot more closely bonded. If the communities are more, they're stronger. And actually, I was talking to a researcher at Cambridge. He's from Bangladesh, and he frequently goes back because one of his studies is in Bangladesh. And he tells me, you know, the people over there, they don't have much money. They don't have much in general, but they're all very happy.
Yeah.
They're happy people. That's the thing. And here, in the Western world, we have, I mean, not everybody, but there are people with more than enough. You know, we have food. I mean, at least compared to low and middle income countries. We've got food, we've got shelter, sanitation, you know, access to opportunities and jobs, yet we're depressed, anxious. The rates of anxiety and depression, some of the highest rates are in the United States and, you know, other Western countries, but the U.S. in particular. And the U.S. is an advanced country, so what is going on there? And the thing is, I mean, one of the things is what I just mentioned, this kind of shifts in society from the focus on the collective to the focus on the self, but also this rise in technology. So right now, so many of us are, you know, we're constantly in front of screens, in front of our cell phones, in front of kids are always playing video games. And when you're constantly in front of the screen, then you're not really interacting with other people. You're more lonely. And also that's kind of, I just want to mention this small link between this rise in technology and social anxiety. So when you're in front of a video game all the time or in front of a screen, then you don't have as much of a chance to talk to others and to develop your social skills.
Right.
If you want to develop like empathy, then you need to be around other people to do that. So, and you know, so many young people today have social anxiety. They have trouble looking another person in the eye, you know, have trouble carrying, having conversations with other people. And one of the things that can increase the risk for this is constantly being in front of this technology. And the other thing is, so now we're not just checking our emails at work, but also outside of work. We are constantly plugged in. Right now, we're exposed to 350% more information outside of work compared to 30 years ago. So this clutters our minds. It affects our mental health, you know. Instead of coming home and just having peace of mind, not thinking about anything and disconnecting, we're on our laptops, we're checking the news on our phones, we're getting notifications, our friends are pinging us with messages. So our minds are bombarded with all of this information. So if we want to have peace of mind, we need to just have some time to disconnect from the world and leave work at work. Don't check your work emails at home. Kind of have that boundary. And this can improve your mental health.
You know, I think actually that's a wonderful point. And I think that people that actually do delineate, I probably think of some specific people as I recall, but like over the years I would say, oh yeah, like, you know, well, let's get so-and-so on the phone. No. He shuts it down at like 7 o'clock or whatever he's done. He shuts it down. And then at least from somebody like me that might be more inclined to work all kinds of different, there really isn't a Saturday or a Sunday, there's night, there's morning. I really have this respect and admiration for people that can really strongly demark and put things into boxes and say, no, you know, I don't do that. The other thing that I think of is I was reading in the self-help world, I'm pretty sure it was Darren Hardy, and he was talking about, he's a big self-help guy, great stuff, and he was talking about information coming in and all of this information. So that we've now become like information junkies. And I can say, you know, personally myself, I get, you know, I'll wake up in the morning and, you know, maybe I could read a book. Sometimes I do. A lot of times I'll start watching videos on YouTube or something like that, or I'll read articles. And he talked about it almost like it was an eating disorder. Like it's like going to the store or going to a restaurant and then just eating everything. Like you don't actually need that much information. Like you really can actually, you're not going to die, but there's this almost this insatiable for more information. And how did we just get that way in this social media area and having smartphones? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so actually related to that point, it's exactly right. And that is because so many of these websites that were on platforms, they're designed in such a way that, you know, they're made to be as addictive as possible. So Professor Cal Newport, he's actually given a TED Talk about this, and he says that so these social media companies, because he was talking about social media in that talk, that they borrow principles from Las Vegas casino gambling to make these sites as addictive as possible.
On purpose.
So we want to stop using them, but it's so hard. It's like, you know, pizza or junk food. You start eating it, and then it's so hard to stop, so you got to start using your willpower. And, you know, this is what I think about. I think now it's harder to be a human now than ever, because we've become so clever with our marketing strategies. Technology has taken off. These websites are
Where's the authenticity? What is authentic anymore, right?
Yeah. And in addition to that, so these websites and all of these technologies, they're made to be as addictive as possible, so we have to apply self-restraint for that. Then there are new addictions that we're dealing with, like online shopping addictions. That wasn't the case before the internet existed. Then junk food, it's made to be as addictive as possible through, salt, sugar ratios that these companies calculate through mathematical formulas. So the food that we're eating is made to be as addictive as possible, and we have to apply self-restraint to that. So we're living in a world which is meant to be as addictive as possible, and we are constantly applying this self-restraint. So that's why I think it is now hard. It's not that it is your fault that you can't let go of video games or online shopping or the food that you're eating or whatever. It's that whatever we're consuming is meant to be as addictive as possible. So it's, it's hard to live in the world today, but there is hope because we can also change.
Well, I love that, and I was thinking, and you're probably on the same vibe as I am in terms of like, God, first is like a very stark picture. Like, I mean, it's like The Walking Dead or something like that. We're in this place where we get, it's just not a very bright kind of picture that we have. But in terms of what the context of this interview and your talks is, people are awakening to this now, and they're looking for solutions. And it seems to me, not being a therapist, not having a doctorate, just being somebody that's suffered or thought through, is it kind of seems like there's one solution almost to all of it. Like, in terms of like, whether it's an AA, they're talking about one day at a time. I'm reading a great book right now. A friend of mine, Jeffrey Combs, give him a little plug. And he's talking about emotional addictions, like being addicted to procrastination and being addicted to avoidance. And we're bombarded by all these things. It seems like, well, what is the answer? I know that there has to be a simplistic kind of an answer. Is it the same kind of answer as being sober or being clean? I mean, are we just all kind of looking for peace within ourselves? What do you see from a research perspective?
Well, there are many things that I'd like to say in relation to this, but the first thing is, so it's important to know about the bleakness of the situation because it lets you realize that it is not your fault that you can't quit drinking or quit eating or quit being online. It's that it is, as I said, it's that these things that are surrounding us, they are designed to be as addictive as possible. So, it's not our fault. Other people are experiencing the same thing. We're in this together. And there is a way out. And the thing that everything starts with is being kind with yourself. Is not yourself to say, okay, I need to just quit drinking from today onwards. Just not one drop. Quit, smoking, and just be harsh with yourself. And then one slip up and you're back to where you started. Drinking a lot or smoking a lot or eating a lot, whatever it is. So you have to be kind with yourself. That's really important. And being patient with yourself because it takes time to change. And the way that you can be kind with yourself is, for one, to start forgiving yourself for any mistakes you think you might have made now or in the past, even if they're big mistakes or small mistakes. When you have anxiety or depression, people are very self-critical. They think a lot about what they're doing wrong and how bad they're feeling. And we do this because we think that this will motivate us to change, but it doesn't. Yes. The thing, it actually makes you be more depressed and anxious. And when we're more depressed and anxious, then we want to drink more, eat more, and just indulge. So the way out of this is to forgive yourself. And, and the thing that I always like to say is, so when we're harsh with ourselves, when we're so self-critical and wanting to punish ourselves, imagine if you had a friend who constantly pointed out everything that you did wrong and everything that was wrong with your life. You would probably want to get rid of this person right away, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, you'd ghost them. You would never take it. Yeah.
But people with anxiety and depression do this to themselves all the time. So, if you think you screwed up about whatever it is, don't worry about it. Let it go. If you wanted to muster up the courage to talk to somebody, but couldn't do so, forgive yourself. And doing so will give you greater compassion towards yourself, and you can't begin to heal until you do this. So that's the first step. Another thing which I think is really helpful in so many different ways is the do it badly technique.
Love that.
Yeah, I use it all the time. I mean, it's helped me get through everything, that I had a tough time with. Basically, so many times we want to do something perfectly. We wait until it's the perfect time to start something, until we have all the skills and resources. We have this image in mind of this perfect thing that we want to do and how we want to do it. But actually doing this and having this perfectionistic tendency stresses us out. It makes it much harder to begin. And so many times, whatever we want to do, we don't end up doing it. We just never end up doing it. So the thing that I would encourage people to adopt is the do it badly technique. Just, whatever you have to, and there's a quote by poet and writer G.K. Chesterton, and he says that anything worth doing is worth doing badly the first time. And the reason that this motto is so effective is that it speeds up your decision making and catapults you straight into action. So if you have a tough time making decisions, if you feel that you can't get started on something until you feel ready enough, just jump into it without worrying about how it's going to turn out. Do it, however. Makes it so much easier to start something, so much easier to finish it. And when you look back, you'll realize that most of the time, whatever you've done is actually not that bad. So if you're trying to recover from alcohol addiction, don't think about, how you're going to do this perfectly and, just do it badly. Just start now however you can. You make one mistake, so what? You had a slip up. It's fine. Just continue as you can. You're falling down as you're when you think of babies, they're trying to walk, falling down, getting back up. They're doing it badly. We have to do the same thing in life, and that actually makes us get things done. And if you're struggling with addictions and you have things to do in your life, again, apply the do it badly technique. Don't wait to be fully sober until you start and finish something. Do it badly. Do it, however, right now.
What are your thoughts on building momentum and making your bed in the morning and doing these things that are task accomplishment? I've heard that making your bed, goals achieved release dopamine, and so it starts to create. What are your thoughts on momentum? And
Yeah. So I do think that, when you wake up in the morning, so there's that speech by that admiral, I can't remember his name, Admiral Williams.
Yeah.
He said that if you want to change your life, start by making your bed in the morning, which I think is so powerful. I completely agree. When we do that one little task each day, it sets the momentum. It gets us going because we've already accomplished one small task for the day, which makes it easier for us psychologically to tackle the next task and to accomplish that. And it's like a domino effect. And so building momentum is important. What I think is, and the research kind of talks about motivation and action. So many times we don't do something because we don't feel like it. We wait for motivation to come before we start feeling like it and taking action. The research says that actually action precedes motivation. It's not the other way around. So most of the time we won't feel like doing something or anything. But once you get going and start doing it badly, then motivation comes and it becomes easier to continue. But what I like to say is, so this is what research says, but in speaking with so many people and kind of conducting my own research, maybe, once you start acting, maybe motivation comes. But what I really think comes is self-esteem and feeling good about yourself. And when you start feeling good about yourself, then that's when you want to keep going and acting rather than procrastinating and putting things off. And again, when we're thinking about things that we have to do, the way to get this ball rolling is to do it badly. It's the only way. I can't see another way out of this, because otherwise
Is this how you have managed to do as much as you've done? I mean, you're at Cambridge, which is incredible. You've got multiple TED Talks. Now you've accomplished your doctorate. I mean, is the pill that you're talking about, is that one that, I know that you don't struggle with anxiety, or it didn't sound like it, or much more so than maybe normal people or whatever, but is this a prescription that you've done yourself then? Do you give yourself this kind of self-talk and say, like, okay, I got to do this or that? Because these things that you've accomplished, they haven't happened by accident, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. I apply the do it badly strategy all the time, and especially for, there are tasks that I don't like to do, I don't want to do, or articles that I don't feel like reading, or things that I have to write that I don't feel like writing. And if I just start doing it however, then I feel so good about myself because I've done that. And the thing is, you can always go back to it and refine, but at least you've got the ball rolling. You've already accomplished something for the day. So I use this all the time. My mother started using this when I was telling her about it. And, so outside of work, she does all the cooking. And for her, she's applied it to cooking, and it's made cooking so much easier, because sometimes it would be a dreaded task.
You can cook badly.
What's that?
You can cook badly.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't have to be perfectly cut up into little pieces. Cut it up, however, without worrying so much about how it's turning out. And you have food ready, food on the table that fills your belly. If you don't feel like washing something, cleaning your cupboards in this perfect way, just do it badly. Honestly, I applied for everything, and it gets things done.
I love that. There's another Canadian, you being Canadian, that I like a lot. His name is Michael Auger. He wrote a book called Law of Attraction book, and which is I see is kind of different overall than maybe research, maybe not, but I remember one of there's a tape or something like that I bought. It was some material, or his book itself, and he was talking about like going and doing even the littlest amount. Like if it was, I forgot what it would be, but he's like, 1 minute of doing whatever that that you should do. And we all know like what we should be doing. Doing 1 minute is better than no minutes. And I keep thinking to myself, like, okay, I want to read more. So maybe, as pathetic as it'll sound sometimes, it's like, okay, like I'll read a page, which of course I can't read one page. As soon as I read a page, then I'm on to the next page. But in my mind, I'm like, I can read a page. Like I can read a page type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was this coach of a famous athlete. She was a runner, famous runner. And he would tell her whenever she didn't feel like practicing to just put on her running shoes.
Well, I like that.
Just put on your running shoes.
So that naturally led to going out, going to the track.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Just put on your running.
Yeah.
I love that. So I got a couple more questions, and you could tell I could fill your whole day, or actually in the UK I could fill the whole evening. But so there's two questions that I have for you. Number one is what role do you see in terms of self-talk, like in pumping yourself up or affirming things within yourself that would lead yourself out? I mean, like, I'm kind of getting to like what overall is the prescription, so that you would tell somebody that was dealing with these things, anxiety, depression, etc., overwhelm. I feel like they're all kind of together, but what role is self-talk, would you say, and the identity that you're giving yourself and who you are?
Yeah. Our self-talk is really important, because when we're constantly criticizing ourselves, then we feel worse. It lowers our self-esteem. It's just really bad. So it's important that next time you recognize that negative thought going through your mind, to just drop it and redirect your attention back to the task at hand, whatever you are doing. you know, or if you're not doing anything, to just becoming more aware of what's around you, like the trees, the leaves on the trees, how the wind feels. So dropping that negative thought is important. I don't think that people should start telling themselves, I'm smart, I'm, you know, I'm like really good at this, kind of those positive affirmations. I don't think that does anything. I think what is important.
Does it do the opposite because you think that's bullshit? I mean, sorry, I mean,
yeah, exactly, because you're telling it to yourself. So it's different if other people are constantly telling you that you're amazing, but when you're telling it to yourself, especially when you have low self-esteem, you're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
You know? So what is really important is to stop thinking about yourself and place your attention onto another being. This gives you meaning and purpose in life, and this reduces your depression and anxiety. There's a quote by the famous neurologist Viktor Frankl who says that for people who think there's nothing to live for and nothing more to expect from life, the question is getting these people to realize that life is still expecting something from you.
Oh, wow. That is really, really profound. Wow.
Yeah. So it's to make yourself crucial in somebody else's life.
God, I love that.
Yeah. And to think about what somebody else wants and needs. And, well, how can you do this? It can be through volunteering, through caring for a child or elderly parent, or even a pet. Because if you don't make yourself crucial in at least one person's life, then you're at risk for depression, for poor mental health. So that's the question that you have to ask yourself. How much of your day is spent with somebody else in mind? And if it's not all, then, well, how can you make yourself valuable or important by helping somebody else? And by helping somebody else and making yourself important to them, then that's when you realize the importance of your own life. You're needed on this planet. Somebody else needs you.
That is so cool. It so much reframes the whole idea that I'm in a rut, I'm on a wheel, I've got to provide for the family, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, instead to think like I'm crucial for their survival.
Exactly.
Wow. That's like almost the opposite of like somebody having suicidal ideation, like the world would be better off without me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you start, because you're acting, number one, you're doing something, and you're doing something to help another being. So, and also it stops that cycle going on in your mind, these negative thoughts and this rumination. It cuts it because you don't have time to think about that when you're focusing on another person. Our minds can't hold two thoughts at once, so we can't be obsessively thinking about our worries and what's wrong with us, and also at the same time be really focused on another person and how we can help them.
So cool. So, you know, again, I'd say thank you for the time, but, you know, I really want to acknowledge and affirm you. I mean, obviously you're super smart, but, you know, you meet a lot of smart people that aren't very nice, I guess, or they're just so smart it just makes you feel really dumb, I think, but, you know, I'm just wondering, like, you're really, really cool, and obviously there's things that, as you're talking about, you just kind of take off. I mean, I can see when you're talking about, like, you know, changes and changing people's perspective to think of others. I mean, you're really a good, I don't know you, but you seem like you're a really good person. What, you know, finishing your doctorate and being at Cambridge and doing, what's on the horizon for you? How can people also weave in there? How can people connect with you? But where are you going? I mean, you're young. You've got what do you see for yourself?
I really enjoy helping people when it comes to anxiety and depression, helping them overcome these conditions. And I'd like to continue on in research on mental health, but specifically overcoming. So perfecting coping strategies and ways to get over anxiety and depression. And I do think that we can get over these conditions, any condition, without medication. I think that medication...
Hugely important. Hugely
Yeah,
important.
many times medication makes things worse. It has side effects. We become dependent on it, and then if you try to come off of it, it's very difficult. And usually it's just a Band-Aid. It doesn't get to the root cause of the issue. So that's why there are coping strategies that we can apply, and if we apply them on a regular basis, we can change. So, continuing this line of work and just trying to help people as much as I can. And if people are interested in finding out more about these coping strategies and what they can do, then, I'm on Twitter, and that's where I post everything that I've written in relation to mental health. I've given some TED Talks on which you can find on YouTube. So
they're awesome. They're awesome.
Thank you. So two are on anxiety. One's more focused on social anxiety, and one is how to cope with anxiety generally, and it's based on research that I've done at the University of Cambridge, and that's where I talk about the do it badly strategy and other strategies. And there's one on loneliness that I've done. So Twitter, I would say, and also if they want to get in touch with me, they can just message me on Twitter. My email address is provided there as well.
I think, to suggest to you, I think that you ought to, there's so many self-help people, I think, that are, they're good, they're nice people, but they're maybe not so qualified. I think you have a great message. I think you ought to, do seminars and stuff like that. I think you'd be really fantastic, actually. Do you have any books coming out? Are you going to write any books or anything?
I am in the process of writing a book, and I'm so excited to just finish it and to get it out there, because that will be basically my baby after all of this work, to put all of my thoughts together into one piece. That will be so nice.
Wow, really great stuff. By the way, what is your Twitter handle? We'll put it in here. There'll be links, by the way, to your TED Talks and things like that. But is that the best way to people to follow you is follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, I've written articles for the Daily Mail or that were picked up by the Daily Mail and other news sources, but the main stuff is on Twitter that I just post there. If anything comes out and, in a newspaper or whatever, then I just link it back to my Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @Olivia Roxann. So that's OLIVIAROXANN.
Terrific. Well, I really have enjoyed this. I think for all of our subscribers, our audience, you can see why I was excited to meet and spend some time with Olivia. And, man, just lots of different great nuggets in our conversation today. So thank you again.
Thank you also.
This has been another interview with Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com. And if you hang on just a second, I will stop the recording.